What's up? It's your boy Monster Man back with another breakdown of Static Season 1, Issue 2. The comic, not the show. I know it's confusing, but hey, they don't pay me for my opinions. Issue 2 is not as strong of an issue as Issue 1, but it sets up a lot of good plot points for the issues to come, and does some essential groundwork for world building that diverges the comic even more into its own universe. I feel conflicted on how separate Static feels from the larger DC comics as the series goes on. I think it's really cool for new readers to not feel like they have to read years of DC comics to jump into this, but it also makes me worried they aren't really committed to continuing this great series. But I'm really getting ahead of myself, so let's just jump into Issue 2. Issue 2 starts with Daisy discovering she has powers. I believe Daisy was in Issue 1, but I don't know if I pointed her out. I didn't quite recognize the new design, but Daisy was a love interest in the Static Shock cartoon. But I don't believe she ever had powers, so this is quite an interesting change that could help her relate to Static more than Frida. Daisy discovers these powers by literally disintegrating her desk with just a touch. While we don't know the full extent of her powers from this panel, it's clear her abilities are quite destructive if she doesn't get them under control. Even if the only thing she can destroy is inanimate objects, you can see the implications of that being quite strong. The almost glitch-like effect and coloring used to represent her power is pretty iconic, and it's nice to know that Nicholas Draper-Ivy's art is continuing to impress me at the start of Issue 2. The scene then transitions to where we left off with Issue 1 with Virgil's house burning down, and Francis is really feeling himself, laughing at the destruction he's caused and delivering the cheesiest line of how Static didn't want none of his smoke. And let's be real, it's cheesy, but it honestly kind of works for me. It's a slang phrase I'm familiar with, though it's a little dated, but Francis has fire powers and he did just win, and not even going to lie, that posing with his burning hand is really selling his confidence, so I couldn't help but smile at the delivery. And then they drop some world building on us, because apparently Hotstreak's power uses his own body as a fuel source, and this will appear to be a trend for multiple Bang Babies going forward. The idea that they will tire out or eventually need food for energy is a good addition in my opinion, and it keeps these characters feeling grounded and like they can be overcome. I've never liked the idea of overpowered characters because they always introduce arbitrary things to weaken those characters to create conflict in a story, instead of letting the characters use the tools or the rules of the world to be the main source of drama. I'm mainly referring to things like Kryptonite, which is purely an object of convenience and doesn't even really fit into the logic of the universe that so many people can find it and use it against Superman when it should be a very limited and rare resource. And it's always somebody with power who ends up discovering Kryptonite. Plot devices like that are really terrible. But back to the story, Virgil recognizes the opportunity to take Francis out, but Francis does something surprisingly clever and asks Virgil if he wants to continue fighting or save his house. Virgil makes what I think is the obvious choice to save his family's home, with some impressive lightning bending to make an ion field at a larger scale, the way he did in the previous issue, to take Francis out and quickly extinguish the fire. In the commotion, Francis gets away, but Virgil saves his house and the family embrace him for a job well done. And I honestly love these wholesome moments in comics, and I think we need more of those. The damage to the house is mainly external. Most of the things inside survive, which is good for the story. It'd be pretty bad to have our character displaced in Issue 2. After determining the house was safe, a conversation takes place that does muddy up my last video a bit, so I'll make those corrections here. I thought his family knew in Issue 1 about his powers, but they clearly find out here in Issue 2, and they were only aware that he was exposed to the gas during the Bang Baby incident, but they thought he was unchanged for the most part. Thus is the struggle of revisiting something after already knowing the end result, so I apologize for misinformation, but just buy it and read it next time and you won't have to take my word for it anymore. Virgil's parents continue to argue about what they should do for Virgil, with no regard to Virgil's input, which is a parallel to the scene from Issue 1. Their argument is pretty interesting, and there is some social commentary in the argument that I do think helps round out the world. There's an acknowledgement of black mistreatment in the medical field, especially involving cases of black women and doctors ignoring their complaints about pain, something that rings true to the time of making this video. In the wake of the late Dr. Moore, who reported she was discharged while still experiencing symptoms of COVID and later died because of her mistreatment. And there are multiple studies that find black people receive worse care on average than white counterparts in the same socioeconomic class. It's nice to see issues like this acknowledged in fiction, even in small lines, to make the world feel more real and closer to our own. Virgil's dad also touches on the idea of his son needing to use his powers as an edge to get ahead, which touches on cultural feelings in parts of the black community, where parents often feel we need to take advantage, or I should say people people often feel we should take advantage of anything we can because the dice are already stacked against us for being black, which is definitely a sentiment I experienced growing up. And for me, that just further brings the story in line to something I can really relate to. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm drawn to this series. Obviously, since Virgil can't get a word in, he's a bit fed up and goes back up to bed without saying a word, and he dreams about the Bang Baby incident that started all of this. Next, we pick up with Virgil back at school, and it says it's been a few weeks since we've last seen him. He apparently got tired of his parents bickering and was ready to go back. During the school day, he's stopped in the halls by Darius. They established that Darius and Virgil were close, since they used to participate in game nights together, but it's clear there's a tension in their current relationship. Darius inquires about what happened at the rumored school fight between Francis and the star basketball player, and Darius seems to know that it was Virgil who fought and is trying to get him to admit it on camera, where Virgil doesn't want the attention, and Darius won't listen, so Virgil fries his phone using his powers. Virgil makes it clear that the followers and fame Darius has is what put a wrench in their friendship, because Darius always seems to be chasing the next story or chasing clout. And I'm sure there's someone who can relate to someone getting a little bit of fame and then coming back different. Virgil decides to skip school after his interaction with Darius because he needs to clear his head. While skateboarding in town, he calls Mr. Metcalf, who is apparently a scientist who gave him the ionized field theory, and asks for his help in dealing with Francis. Luckily, Mr. Metcalf is a real one, and immediately understands Static's situation, and gives him access codes to a lab that may have something that can help him. Before we even get to see what's in the lab, we get a B-plot with Darius investigating what happened to be a Bang Baby friend of his who looks kind of like a little devil. Apparently, the devil boy, who I don't think is named yet, went on a meeting with other Bang Babies led by another fire user named Holocaust, who has some radical ideas that Bang Babies should be controlling the public, but the meeting was interrupted by a militant force that was targeting them. Holocaust abandoned the group to fend for themselves, and apparently Francis led the charge against the military force and took out 7 of the soldiers by himself before he went down, motivating the other Bang Babies to fight back. But our storyteller, the Devil Boy, ran away in the chaos. He reached out to Darius because he feels like he is now on the run and doesn't know what to do, especially because unlike some other Bang Babies, he can't exactly hide his appearance. After the Bang Baby finishes telling his story, we then see Static discover the lab, and we get a glimpse of what would be a suit if you've been paying attention to the covers. But right as he walks in, a police force fully armed raise their guns and demands that he walks out with his hands up. The issue does a good job of setting things up to come, and it continues to be a fun read. It isn't as packed with content as issue 1. It has enough going for it to make you want to know where the story is going next, and this issue gives a lot of good setup. I'll try not to leave you hanging too long and put up my next review of issue 3 as soon as I can, but don't sleep on Static and check it out for yourself. If you like this video, remember to like and subscribe and leave me a comment if I got anything else wrong, which I'm sure I did. Thank you.